President Trump believed a simple gesture would silence her. But Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet, spoke one powerful sentence, and ignited a nationwide debate that nobody could ignore. No one anticipated how this Tuesday would unfold. Not the journalists stationed behind the barriers, not the aides arranging seats in the Roosevelt Room, not even the president himself. But if anyone sensed something significant was brewing, it would have been Jasmine Crockett. She hadn't traveled from Dallas to make all eyes, not this time. She'd arrived on Monday evening, caught minimal sleep, and entered the White House Tuesday morning carrying a manila folder and displaying the kind of unwavering determination that can't be manufactured. The gathering was promoted as a bipartisan forum on educational reform, supposedly showcasing unity. Publicly, the agenda included discussing funding disparities, teacher shortages, and modernizing school facilities. Privately, however, both parties had arrived ready to defend their positions. The room featured its usual power brokers senators from Michigan and Texas, a representative from a Nebraska district, the Secretary of Education appearing polished and prepared, and at the table's head, President Donald Trump in his second term. Surrounded by advisors, Jasmine selected a seat near the far end, but not quietly. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. She exchanged morning pleasantries with a Republican representative from Nevada, offering a courteous smile, then opened her folder. No dramatics, just bullet points, local statistics, and personal letters from educators in her district, authentic stories written in black ink. A staffer opened the meeting with standard rhetoric about collaboration and shared objectives, then handed control to Trump. He delivered a familiar speech covering record funding amounts, school choice initiatives, and bureaucratic inefficiency. His tone carried energy but defensiveness, as though anticipating opposition before anyone responded. Jasmine listened intently. She allowed him to speak, permitted others their turns too, some offering praise, others presenting minor criticisms. But when her opportunity came, she didn't request permission. She simply began. "Mr. President," she said, "I represent a district where some schools lack adequate air conditioning and where educators purchase supplies from their personal funds because they don't have essential materials." A brief pause followed, just long enough for someone in the back to glance up from their notepad. She continued, "We keep hearing about school choice as though it's a universal solution. But if public schools aren't funded fairly, we're setting entire communities up for failure." Her tone remained respectful yet unwavering. She spoke with rhythm, like an attorney presenting a case. She even read from a letter written by a fourth-grade teacher in East Dallas who'd used her own salary to purchase desks for her students. Trump looked right, then back at her. "Are you finished?" he asked. "I'll conclude in 8 seconds," she replied. "But I think it's reasonable to ask, why is it still this severe, and when do we stop pretending it's effective?" A moment of silence followed, not hostile, not loud. Just still. The Secretary of Education cleared her throat. A senator from Kansas shifted in his seat. Jasmine sat back calmly, hands folded on the table. She wasn't grandstanding or trying to embarrass anyone. She simply posed the kind of question people back home had been shouting into the void for years. Trump didn't respond directly. Instead, he turned slightly and muttered something to a nearby aide. The aide nodded. Seconds later, 2 White House security members entered through the side door, quiet but visible. That's when it became clear he wasn't going to debate with her. He was going to remove her. But the moment those guards stepped forward, everything shifted. Jasmine didn't flinch when the guards entered. She didn't raise her voice or leave her chair. She just looked at them, then back at Trump, as though she hadn't finished her statement. One guard, a younger man with a shaved head and White House pin on his lapel, took a cautious step forward. His eyes scanned the room, not aggressively, but clearly waiting for some signal from her or someone else to proceed. Trump leaned back slightly. and tapped his index finger twice on the table. The meaning was unmistakable. "Congresswoman," the guard said quietly, "we're going to need you to." But Jasmine raised one hand, not to stop him, but to interject. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice remained calm, as though reassuring him more than resisting. "I'm just asking a question." At that moment, you could hear chairs creaking, papers being suddenly shuffled, the kind of ambient movement that occurs when people sense something might escalate too far. Then unexpectedly, Senator Howard Keller from Wisconsin, a Republican known more for his golf game than anything else, spoke up. "She didn't threaten anyone, did she?" The room shifted again. Trump looked in Keller's direction, eyebrows raised. "I mean," Keller added, "I thought we were here to discuss things. It's called a roundtable for a reason." Trump's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't respond. The atmosphere felt heavier now. One of his advisors leaned in to whisper something, but Jasmine, still seated, turned slightly so everyone could hear her again. "I wasn't attacking you, Mr. President. I asked a question. I'm here representing thousands of families whose schools look like they haven't seen fresh paint since the early 90s. That's not disruption, that's doing my job." The guard shifted on his feet, looked back toward his supervisor near the door, then to Jasmine again. He clearly didn't want to escalate, and she wasn't giving him reason to dot another Republican across the table. Representative Melissa Darnell from Utah added cautiously, "She's making a point we all know exists. It may not be comfortable, but it's real." That's when Jasmine stood up, not abruptly, not defiantly, just steadily, like someone standing behind their truth. "If asking about equity in public schools makes you uncomfortable," she said, "then maybe that's the conversation we need most." Her voice didn't crack. Her posture didn't waver. Cameras in the room, which had mostly been focused on Trump, started panning toward her. You could see in the feed that C-SPAN had switched to a wide shot. Everything was being recorded. Trump tapped his finger again, twice quickly, but the guards still didn't move. Whether it was hesitation or confusion, they were clearly unsure. Jasmine didn't wait for them. "I'll excuse myself," she said, "but I won't apologize for speaking truth in a room that claims to care about children." With that, she picked up her folder, pushed in her chair, and calmly walked toward the back of the room. No shouting, no dramatics, just quiet tension. She passed one of the younger aides on her way out, a woman barely in her 20s who gave her a look, not of pity or admiration, but something like understanding. Once the door closed behind her, there was stillness again for a few seconds. No one said a word. Then Trump, eyes locked on the empty chair, said flatly, "We can move on." But nothing about that meeting was going to move on the way they thought it would. Because by the time Jasmine hit the sidewalk, her name was already trending online. Jasmine hadn't even reached the White House gates before her phone buzzed 3 times in a row, then again, then again. She didn't check it yet. She just walked, eyes ahead, her folder tucked under her arm, heels clicking steadily against the stone like METRONOME. Outside, a small group of reporters who hadn't been allowed inside waited near the barricades. They hadn't witnessed what just happened, but they could sense it from the way the security guard escorting her kept a step behind, silent, as though he didn't quite know if he was guiding her or just witnessing her back inside the Roosevelt room. Things weren't so steady. Trump was irritated. That was obvious to everyone around the table. He fidgeted with his notes. His responses to the next speaker came off clipped, even mocking. At one point, when Representative Darnell tried to bring up school lunch subsidies, he cut her off with, "We're not here to discuss cafeteria food." You could practically hear the PR alarm bells going off in the back of the room. Staffers whispered. An aide slid his phone across the table toward the president. It was a news alert from a political blog, already picking up the story. Breaking: Trump removes Representative Jasmine Crockett from Education Roundtable after tense exchange. He read it. His jaw tightened not in rage but in calculation. The plan had been simple: keep things civil, let both sides speak just enough to maintain appearances, then leave the room with a few headline-friendly quotes about working together. What he hadn't expected was someone like Jasmine Crockett to walk in and actually discuss the things voters back home lose sleep over. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't even refused to leave. And somehow that made it worse for him. One of his longtime advisors leaned in and asked, "Do we want to comment now or wait till the press briefing?" Trump didn't answer. Meanwhile, outside, Jasmine checked her phone for the first time. The notifications were overwhelming. Mentions from public school teachers across the country. A video someone had recorded off the C-SPAN stream, already posted and reshared thousands of times. A message from her chief of staff: "You're everywhere, and I mean everywhere. CNN wants you on tonight. MSNBC calling now." She sat down on a low stone bench near the East Wing parking circle, just to breathe. It was chilly, but she barely noticed. A Capitol police officer passed by, nodded suddenly, then kept walking. That's when she opened Twitter. The clip had already racked up over 180,000 views in less than 25 minutes. The headline under it read, "If asking about equity in public schools makes you uncomfortable, then maybe that's the conversation we need most." Jasmine Crockett, and there she was, standing in the room, firm but calm, speaking to the President of the United States and refusing to be treated like a disruption just for doing her job. In a video reply, a woman in Detroit, probably in her late 50s, sat in a car with tears in her eyes. "I've been waiting my whole life to hear someone say that in front of him," she said. Another clip came from a teacher in Phoenix who simply wrote, "She said what we've all been thinking." That's leadership. Back in the Roosevelt room, Trump was still fuming beneath the surface. He kept throwing glances toward the door where Jasmine had walked out. At one point he muttered, "She made it about race." To which Senator Keller replied, "No, she made it about schools." That shut the room down for a moment. But Jasmine wasn't thinking about that anymore. She was on the phone with her mom. "Baby," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion, "did you just challenge the president on live TV?" Jasmine chuckled softly. "I asked the question, Mama." There was a pause. "Well," her mom said, "you asked the right one." But while Jasmine was finally catching her breath, the noise outside was only just beginning. By the time Jasmine reached her hotel in Foggy Bottom, the clip had hit over 900,000 views. Every cable news channel had it playing in a loop, each with their own spin. CNN called it a seismic moment. Fox News said she had disrespected the presidency. But the footage didn't lie, and neither did the silence that followed her words. Inside her room, she kicked off her heels and sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the lights. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Ava Gordon, her communications director. "I hope you're sitting down," Ava said before Jasmine even said hello. "Already am." "They're calling it the line of the year," Jasmine exhaled slowly. "You mean the line that got me kicked out?" "Girl, that line just put you on every living room TV screen in America." Jasmine stared at the dim city lights outside her window. "I wasn't trying to make a moment. She trailed off. "You just said what nobody else in that room had the guts to say," Ava said, "and the internet knows it." But even then, Jasmine didn't smile, not fully. She wasn't naive. Viral moments come and go. This wasn't about fame. It was about whether the point would stick, whether the system would keep pretending not to hear. Back at the White House, the press briefing room was packed. Reporters fired questions at the press secretary, all circling the same storm. Why was Jasmine Crockett asked to leave? Was she removed for asking about funding inequality? Will the White House issue a statement? The press secretary danced around every question, saying only that the roundtable was meant to be collaborative and disruption was handled appropriately. It was weak. Everyone saw it. That night, Jasmine went on MSNBC Live via Zoom. She was in a simple navy sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back. The host, Nina Conway, greeted her like a returning guest even though they'd never met. "Congresswoman Crockett, I want to thank you first for not only being with us but for holding your ground. Thank you, Nina, it wasn't planned. It just came out honest." Conway leaned forward. "When you said, if asking about equity makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's the conversation we need most. Did you know that would hit the way it did?" Jasmine shook her head. "I was just tired of pretending. There are kids in my district eating lunch from vending machines and sitting in classrooms without functioning heat. If asking about that is too much, then maybe the system's more broken than they're willing to admit." The interview went viral all over again, in a church basement in New York. A group of public school parents watched the replay projected on the wall. In a break room at a community center in Albuquerque, a janitor paused his shift to listen. Even in a diner off Interstate 35 in southern Missouri, a white waitress named Connie turned up the TV volume. When a customer grumbled about another loud liberal, she replied flatly. She wasn't yelling. She was telling the truth. Jasmine was in the air again the next morning, heading home to Texas. The flight attendant recognized her. "You're the Congresswoman, right?" Jasmine nodded. "I saw the video. My son goes to a Title I school. What you said, thank you." Jasmine smiled softly. "Tell him we're not done fighting." She sank into her seat, closed her eyes, and for the first time since leaving that room, she let herself breathe deeply. This wasn't over, not even close. But something had shifted. She could feel it, and while Trump might have thought he'd shut her down by signaling those guards, he'd done the opposite. He'd given her a stage, and she'd used it to shine a light so bright no one could look away. But what came next wasn't something even she could have predicted.